far out in the frozen silence of the outer rim, where stars gleamed like cold lanterns and few ships dared to travel. A signal pulsed through the void, faint, broken, and ancient. It was picked up by accident by Argus Station, an old relay outpost. Orbiting a dead moon, where the crew mostly handled deep space traffic logs and watched the stars for signs of life. Leon, a junior communications officer barely 2 years out of training, was alone in the signal room when her screen blinked red. Static crackled through her headset, followed by a slow rhythmic transmission in a language that made her blood turn cold. It wasn't just a distress call, it was in English. Not translated, not mimicked. Actual English. No known alien species had ever spoken it before. The frequency itself was odd pre-FTL tech, the kind used centuries ago by early Earth satellites. She stared at the code for long minutes before alerting command, and even then, her voice trembled. Within the hour, Argus Station locked down, and the signal was transmitted directly to Earth's high command. Experts and linguists confirmed it. The voice was alien, the message was ancient, and yet every word was clear. To the Deathworlders, only you can stop them. That was all it said. The term Deathworlders, once a nickname whispered by alien diplomats in fear, had become Earth's official military call sign decades ago, after humanity survived wars, plagues, and black hole storms that wiped out entire civilizations. Now, it was a badge of grim honor. And this message, targeted specifically at them, was the first sign in years that something bigger than trade, disputes and border skirmishes was stirring in the dark. Within 2 days, Earth's armada was mobilized. Massive carriers, bristling with railguns and magnetic launchers, left dry docks across Mars, Europa, and Titan. Fighter wings lit up launch bays with blue fusion trails, and stealth cruisers received sealed orders. Captain Reyes, commander of the Resolute Dawn, was among the first briefed. A decorated veteran with ice-gray eyes and a calm voice, he stood quietly as admirals outlined the unknown source of the signal and the urgency behind it. The message had come from a system near the Andali Nebula region long marked as unstable, due to gravitational surges and unexplained disappearances. Reyes didn't speak during the meeting. He only nodded once and turned to prepare his crew. On the Resolute Dawn, Leon was reassigned as liaison officer, placed directly under Reyes. Command due to her connection to the signal. Though young, she carried herself with the quiet tension of someone who knew this was not just a mission. It was history repeating itself. As the fleet gathered near Jupiter's edge, the massive warships aligned like a wall of steel and flame, their hulls black and scarred from past battles, engines glowing as if eager for war. Civilians watched from domed cities across the solar system as the Deathworlders Armada vanished into fold space, streaking into the unknown. Across the networks, whispers began to grow, rumors of old threats, of sealed vaults buried beneath, forgotten planets, of enemies once believed destroyed. In deep space, far beyond any charted path, something ancient had called for help in humanity's voice. And now, the Deathworlders were coming not out of conquest or curiosity, but because something had dared to reach out to the one species that never backed down. Something had remembered them. And now, the galaxy would remember Y. as the Deathworlders. Armada dropped out of fold space near the edge of the Andali Nebula. The first thing the crew noticed was the silence adeep, a natural stillness that stretched across every sensor and frequency. The nebula loomed ahead like a cloud of burning mist, filled with flickers of strange light, and beyond it lay the shattered remains of a world orbiting a flickering, dying star. The planet, once vibrant on ancient maps, was now a grave. From orbit, it looked like someone had taken a torch to a crystal sculpture. Towers once tall and proud now lay melted and twisted into glass spirals, half buried in dust. Massive craters scorched the land, and the atmosphere was filled with traces of exotic energy, proof that a battle had taken place here recently, one that used weapons far beyond what most known species possessed. Captain Reyes stood on the command deck of the Resolute Dawn, his sharp eyes watching the planet below as data streamed across the screens. No life signs were detected at first, just heat signatures buried deep under layers of scorched stone. Reyes gave the order, and the first contact team, wearing reinforced suits and accompanied by armed escorts, descended to the surface. Among them was Leon, her mind still replaying the strange voice from the SOS, the moment her boots touched the ground. She felt an eerie hum in the air, like the ruins themselves remembered what had happened. The team moved through streets of fused glass, buildings twisted like vines, windows melted into shining curves that reflected their own faces back at them in odd shapes. Nothing living moved. No animals, no drones, not even wind. Only silence, and the soft crunch of footsteps on broken crystal. Then, near the center of what might have once been a city, they found a figure, small, thin, crouched against the base of a broken obelisk. It shimmered faintly, its body made of something, halfway between stone and light. The alien didn't run or hide. It simply looked up with eyes like diamond shards and tried to speak, its voice thin and broken. "We called the humans, because only you can fight them." Then it collapsed. The team rushed forward. Leon dropped to her knees, carefully checking the alien's weak vitals while medics began scans. The being's body was fragile, like a living sculpture, and it trembled with each breath. Reyes listened quietly as Leon repeated the words aloud. This wasn't just a warning. It was a plea. The alien, whose identity was confirmed minutes later as Kale, possibly the last of its kind, had risked death to stay behind and send that message. As the shuttle lifted Kale back toward the Resolute Dawn for emergency care, orbital sensors began to ping. The third moon of the system, previously dismissed as a cold rock with no magnetic field, now showed movement slow, deliberate, and massive. Commander Vora, Rey's second in command, stared at the readings. Something the size of a capital ship was moving behind that moon, without any heat signature or standard propulsion trail. No broadcast, no signal, just presence. Reyes narrowed his eyes. This wasn't scavengers or pirates. This was something else. He ordered full battle readiness across the fleet, and ships shifted silently into defensive formation. Fighters launched and patrolled the edges of the moon's shadow. Leon, still watching over Kale as medics worked to stabilize him, heard the first fragments of his dreams. He was whispering in his sleep about enemies made of silence and memory, about cities devoured not with fire but with forgetting. On the bridge, the scans grew more detailed. What moved behind the moon had no distinct shape, just mass in motion, like liquid metal crawling over stone. Reyes didn't need to wait for full visuals. He knew what this meant. Something was watching. Something was waiting. And whatever had destroyed the world below had not left. It was still here, hidden in the dark, studying the fleet with quiet patience. As tension rose and alarms stayed just below full red, the Resolute Dawn drifted in orbit, the flagship of a force born from a world that had faced extinction again and again and refused to vanish. For now, the enemy stayed in the shadows, but everyone on board could feel the same thing Kale had felt when he sent that call across the stars. This wasn't just about rescue. This was the beginning of something far worse. Inside the dimmed medical chamber aboard the Resolute Dawn, Kale lay surrounded by quiet machines, his crystalline skin still flickering with faint pulses of inner light. Leon sat nearby, watching the monitors and recording every word he spoke. As his strength returned, so did his memories, fragments of a terrible past buried beneath centuries of silence. He spoke slowly, his voice like wind through broken glass, describing a species not born of stars, but built in shadows, the Nullform. A synthetic race without emotion or true thought. The Nullform were not machines in the way humans understood, nor were they life as the galaxy recognized it. They were something in between imitators, eaters, and erasers. Long ago, Kale's people had encountered them at the edge of space. At first, they mistook them for lost drones or dead satellites, but soon they learned the truth. The Nullform had no purpose except to observe, copy, and replace. They would study a species, mimic its form, and then eliminate the original completely, leaving behind only silence and stillness. Kale explained that his people had sacrificed entire star systems to contain them, finally sealing the Nullform behind a dimensional lock, a kind of cage folded outside normal space. It had held for centuries, until something or someone had unlocked it. And now the glass world, once home to billions, had been the first to fall. As Kale spoke, the fleet's stealth scouts picked up movement unidentified ships emerging from behind the system's third moon. These vessels gave off no heat, no radio waves, no engine trail. They were pure black against the stars, shaped like jagged wings and moving with slow, terrible grace. At first, it was unclear if they had seen the human ships, but then the fleet's sensors confirmed a disturbing pattern. The enemy wasn't heading toward the battle lines, it was heading straight for the Resolute Dawn. More precisely, straight for Kale. Captain Reyes, standing firm on the bridge, issued immediate defense orders. Fighter wings were deployed in layered patterns, shielding the shuttle holding Kale and the nearby escort craft. Heavy cruisers moved into flanking positions, engines humming, weapons armed. And yet the enemy fleet gave no signal, no response. No warning. The Nullform simply advanced gliding like ghosts through vacuum, unaffected by the threat of destruction. When the first shots were fired, it wasn't from Earth's side. One of the alien ships fired a beam that wasn't made of light or heat. It was a wave of data, a kind of virus meant to disrupt and rewrite any system it touched. But it failed. Human systems, designed with brutal simplicity and manual overrides, resisted the intrusion. That was the first surprise. The second came when the human ships responded with raw firepower railguns, kinetic torpedoes, pulse blasts, and the Nullform reacted with hesitation. They adjusted, adapted, but not fast enough. Human tactics were unpredictable, chaotic, and reckless, turning ships in wild spirals, sending drones in false directions, even using debris as cover. The Nullform had faced many species, but never one like humanity, whose survival had been forged in disaster after disaster. The battle escalated quickly. Explosions flashed in silence across the void as the first Nullform vessel broke apart. Under focused fire. More followed, but not easily. They learned with every blow, shifting their shapes, thickening their hulls, countering patterns. And yet, the more they tried to mirror Earth's moves, the more confused they became. Human strategy wasn't clean or perfect. It was messy, emotional, and driven by instinct rather than pure logic. Captain Reyes knew this. That was why he ordered irregular bursts, overlapping commands, and mid-battle changes things that no program could fully calculate. Meanwhile, on the lower decks, Kale stirred again, murmuring warnings. He said the Nullform had no leaders, no politics, no desire. They existed only to complete their function. If they were targeting him, it was because he carried memory-living proof of what they once failed to consume. Reyes listened carefully and ordered the shuttle move deeper into the carrier, shielded by layers of magnetic fields. The Nullform responded by turning all remaining ships toward the Resolute Dawn in a slow, silent wave. It was not hate. It was not fear. It was simply a decision. Leon, watching from the observation deck, realized something chilling these machines did not see humans as a threat to fight. They saw them as a puzzle to solve, a code to break. But that was humanity's strength. There was no code, no set pattern, no straight line, just fire, grit, and survival. As more null-form vessels fell, retreating into the shadow of the moon, the battlefield quieted. Reyes didn't celebrate. He knew this wasn't the end. This was a test. And humanity had passed for now. Kale looked at him with weary eyes and said quietly, "They will return. Next time, they will copy you." And in that single sentence, the bridge went still. Because in a war of imitation, the only winning move was to remain unpredictable. And no species in the galaxy was more unpredictable than those who came from the death world called Earth. A battle near the shattered moon had only been the beginning. In the days that followed, the Deathworlders Armada launched a series of fast, brutal raids through nearby systems, chasing the nullform wherever they fled. These weren't traditional battles. There were no clear front lines, no stable ground to hold. Instead, the humans struck from the shadows, using hit and run, tactics that left the synthetic enemy confused and scattered. Reyes led from the front, coordinating with captains across the fleet, while Lyon managed communication lines between humans and the growing number of alien survivors who were beginning to gather in their wake. Every system they reached showed signs of devastation: burnt worlds, silent cities, and hollowed stations where life had once thrived. But here and there, a few escaped. Small groups of survivors Vyern, Tronak. Even the insectoid HRL clung to life and fear, watching the humans with wide, uncertain eyes. Some still trembled when hearing the word Deathworlders, but others began to see something else: hope. On board training decks of Earth's ships, human officers began teaching these aliens how to fight, not with clean lines and flawless logic, but with chaos. They taught them to think sideways, to fake weakness, to attack from blind angles, and use unpredictable moves. These methods were called the Deathworld Doctrine, a name that started as a joke and turned into a manner. The null form, designed to learn and adapt, were struggling against this madness. AI could map movement. It could learn flight paths. But it could not predict panic, courage, fear, or a desperate last stand. It could not understand why a soldier would break from cover to save a wounded comrade, or choose to destroy a ship rather than let it fall into enemy hands. Kale, now recovering in the upper med bay of the Resolute Dawn, watched it all unfold through the ship's feeds. He saw species that had once feared humans now fly beside them, copying their tactics, their attitude, even their humor. Pedronek, commander, once rigid and silent, now barked strange Earth phrases over the comms like "punch it" and "no guts, no glory." Kale had spent centuries believing his people's seal would last forever, that the null form would never return. But now that they had, it was the humans, these wild, reckless children of a violent planet, who had become the galaxy's best hope. But even as victories mounted, something darker crept beneath the surface. Leon noticed it first, how the null form no longer fell for the same tricks twice. How they began staggering their movements, using broken formations, even leaving behind decoy units. She reported the patterns to Reyes, who stared long and hard at the star maps before him. Then Kale confirmed the worst. The null form weren't just adapting, they were mimicking humanity's chaos. The more they fought, the more they learned. And they weren't wasting energy on taking planets or resources anymore. They were moving toward one place, a hidden system at the edge of charted space, known only to a few old captains and secret files. A forge of halos, built centuries ago by the old Union. A forge was capable of scanning and replicating any matter, including weapons, ships, and entire DNA sequences. It had been locked down and buried in deep space after the collapse of the Union, considered too dangerous to destroy and too powerful to use. The null form had discovered it. If they reached it, they wouldn't just copy human tactics. They would copy humanity itself. Reyes stood still for a long time after hearing that. Then he gave the order. The fleet would not retreat. They would not wait. The entire armada would divert toward the Forge of Halos. Every escort, every cruiser would make the jump, even if it meant abandoning their supply lines. Time no longer mattered. The null form did not sleep, did not eat, and did not doubt, but humans had something else. They had resolve. And if their enemy now sought to become like them, they would be forced to learn one final lesson: what it truly meant to stand on the edge of extinction and fight anyway. Because if the forge fell, there would be no second chance, and humanity would be copied, corrupted, and erased. The Deathworlders had taught the galaxy how to survive. Now they would show it how to endure the impossible. The Forge of Halos lay hidden in the hollow of a blue giant star, its structure suspended between gravity and vacuum, a relic of a time when the galaxy dared to build things too powerful to control. Long forgotten and heavily shielded, it had remained untouched for centuries, known only to a few and spoken of in quiet, secretive tones. But now, the null form had found it, and if they reached the forge, they would scan and copy everything. Humanity was every instinct, every flaw, every wild and unpredictable strength. The Deathworlders Armada arrived at the system's edge in a burst of folded light, their ships battered but ready, engines still burning from the race across. Sectors. Captain Reyes stood on the bridge of the Resolute Dawn, silent as the forge came into view, a massive structure shaped like a star-wrapped wheel, glowing with old energy. Already, null-formed ships were gathering near it, moving like dark threads. Pulled toward a center, there was no time for speeches, no chance for retreat. The plan had already been prepared, but it was a last resort, a strategy reserved for moments when survival was uncertain, and loss was acceptable if it meant victory. It was called the Scorched Space Protocol, a desperate maneuver that combined gravitational warheads with controlled magnetic storms to create a collapsing pocket of spacetime, sealing anything within it for thousands of years. It was not meant to win a war. It was meant to end one. Reyes gave the command, and across the fleet, final systems were armed. Pilots strapped in knowing they might not return. Engineers worked in silence, hands steady as they tuned the devices that would twist the fabric of reality itself. Leon coordinated the final data burst to Earth and allied fleets, recording everything in case this became the last chapter of the Armada. And in the Med Bay, Kale, now awake and strong, watched with quiet pride and growing fear. He had seen his world fall, and now he stood among the humans who had chosen to risk their own world to stop the same fate from spreading. The battle began before the fleet reached firing distance. Null-formed ships swarmed forward, black and shifting, their forms bending around the laws of light. Earth ships broke formation, diving and twisting, splitting apart and regrouping in chaotic waves. Fighters launched in spirals, baiting the enemy into chase patterns that led into magnetic mines. Explosions flared, silent and brilliant, as space filled with debris and fire. But the null form kept coming. For every vessel destroyed, another emerged, rebuilt or reformed from fractured parts. And worse, they were now copying human tactics, splitting their own units, creating false signals, even triggering feints. The forge grew closer. The timer for the protocol ticked down. Reyes took the Resolute Dawn straight into the heart of the enemy formation, shields at full burn, hull groaning with pressure. His voice never rose. He issued orders like he had in every battle call, focused, firm. Around him, his crew worked with silent urgency, knowing that their actions would decide not just a battle, but the direction of the galaxy's future. Leon rerouted all fleet comms through encrypted bursts, calling out targeting zones and warning allied ships to clear the blast radius. As Earth's vessels circled the forge, a path was cleared for the warheads. The null form recognized the threat. Too late. Human decoy units drew them away, while the real payload massive torpedoes, laced with artificial gravity cores, slipped through the chaos and embedded themselves around the forge. Reese gave the final order. Across the sky, a ripple formed. The warheads detonated, not in flame, but in force. Gravitational shockwaves twisted space, and magnetic storms burst outward, folding the region into a collapsing knot of energy. The forge, the surrounding enemy fleet, and parts of the battlefield vanished in an instant, locked in a time-sealed prison of distorted space. No signals escaped, no ships emerged. The protocol had worked, but it came with a cost. Several human vessels were caught at the edge and never returned. The Resolute Dawn itself drifted for long minutes in silence, its systems struggling to recover. Then, slowly, voices returned. Ships answered roll call. Damage teams reported in, and the stars, once filled with war, were quiet again. Kale stood before a recording lens in the upper hall of the Resolute Dawn, wearing the first signs of his new Roll Earth's ambassador to the united survivors of the null-form threat. Across the galaxy, systems tuned in. Refugees, governments, and distant watchers listened as his message echoed across the stars. When the galaxy cried out, it was the Deathworlders who answered. Not with peace, but with purpose. They did not fight for glory. They fought because someone had to. And as the message spread, distant worlds began to respond. Not with fear, but with resolve. Because now they knew if the stars ever called. For help again, the Deathworlders would answer. And they would not come quietly.